All right. This is Tim Kaine. Incorrect assumptions. The biggest killer of teams. I'll tell you what, too. There's I work here in Poland, right? So, these are not people with English as their first language and to varying degrees of that language. And there's just a lot of language barrier problems that happen sometimes or incorrect assumptions that happen because of, a misunderstanding of words, either on my side or their side. It's a big killer. Miscommunications, I would say, are one of the biggest wastes of time that you don't anticipate, and you can't. It's not like you can say, okay, nobody have a miscommunication or misunderstanding about what I'm about to tell you. Good, wonderful. Let's work on this this game. Let's see what Tim has to say.
Hi, everyone. It's me, Tim.
Hi, Tim.
And today I want to talk about incorrect
Do
assumptions.
it.
What I mean by that is there's a lot of people watching this channel now, and I'm really careful how I say things, but I'm reading all the comments. I don't always respond. In fact, I frequently don't respond. I try to, and if I have time and I have something that I can say that doesn't require a big video, I try to answer. But I'm seeing a lot of comments that make assumptions about what I'm saying that aren't right. And
I get the same problem, Tim, all the time. I mention using assets in games, and I get people going off of me saying, oh, so it's bad to use assets in games. No, it's not. It happens. I think that people just are trying to understand in some cases, and they make a logical leap, and they say that in an effort to understand. But there's misunderstandings or incorrect assumptions that can be honest and in good faith, and then there's ones that are in bad faith, right? And those are like people that are trying to find the worst in you. That's the so what you're saying is people, right? Those are the bad faith arguers. But there could just be a friend like, oh, so you mean this? It's like, oh no, you don't. Okay, please correct me where I'm wrong on that, right? Not bad, but because of all those asset flips it's seen as so. Yeah, I think I've worked with a lot of companies that use assets in games. It's just okay. One red flag. Two, three, four. Like, how many asset packs are you using? Oh, you're using a system asset pack. Okay. People understand what is a prototype versus actual product. That too. That too.
I've done videos about watching my videos with nuance and um, what it's like to be a game director and what it's like to be a programmer and what it's like to be a designer. But this is something different. This is me saying one thing and a listener or watcher thinking I said something else and
Yeah.
then responding to that.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes I read a comment that's so wrong, I don't know how to respond. Like the base assumptions of the comment are incorrect. So I don't know what to say. So what I do is I want to walk through some of the things I'm reading just so you can go, oh, I may have done that, or I wasn't doing that, I meant something else. And that's the other thing. People write things and sometimes I misread them, or sometimes they write them in a vague way and I thought they were asking one question, they were asking another. So
Yeah, I needed to get better at that too. So it's definitely a problem where if you make an incorrect assumption, the best thing to do is ask, what do you mean? Like, why? Rephrase that for me so I can understand it. Something that I have struggled with and I'm trying to get better at, but there are still times where I jump to the wrong conclusion and I argue on that, or I take it personally and or I get offended by it or something, and it wasn't the original intention. And that kind of just helps to teach me, like, if you don't understand something, seek understanding. Do not make any other move at that time other than trying to understand. And that, I think, requires a lot of tact and skill and a good mindset, especially when you're in like a bad mood. I think that it's really easy to fly off the handle or to make assumptions, and it happens. It's kind of an adult thing that happens. Best thing is to launch a flurry of personal attacks. Yeah, you got it, Panzer. You ready to work in some of the companies I worked for before?
let me walk through some of these. Probably the first one I want to mention is I do not speak for the entire game industry. The game industry is huge. It's bigger
Same.
than movies and television and music combined.
Yep.
I've only experienced a small fraction of the game industry. Yes, I've done it for 42 years. This will be, by the time you watch this, I'll be a few months away from ending my 43rd year.
Wild.
But
Legend.
I've never done indie. I've never done mobile. I've never even done AAA. Technically, all my games are AA at best. AAA budgets have always eluded me.
He says that, but I would say well, no, Outer Wilds. Well, I don't know. Could you really say WildStar was a double A production? I mean, it's always changed, especially by the time that WildStar came out. You know, the budgets and the MMO. Yeah, I would almost say that was triple A. I could see how Outer Worlds I would categorize as double A, with a very high budget, especially because it was self-published. But for WildStar, it was published by, oh god, who worked on WildStar? I mean, but by the way, our definitions could just be different. NC Soft, yeah, it was NC Soft. It's definitely not small. I don't know. I mean, for the most part, let's just say Tim. Yeah, Tim is. Yeah, he's pretty much primarily double A.
Except in WildStar, but I didn't stay to the end of that. And well, you can decide if WildStar's AAA.
All right. You know what? I'll just shut the fuck up and I'll let the video play because eventually Tim will say the things that I was meaning anyway. Okay, fine. Okay, it is Tim. It is. Yeah. Here we are pausing him right before. Well, WildStar was technically AAA.
Decide if WildStar's AAA.
Okay. Yeah. Go for
What
it.
I'd recommend, there is a video, a career video. I'm going to link it below. It's what auto plays when you come to the channel, at least the first time you come to the channel, depending on, I guess,
I love
how you're
coming
looking
to
at the
Tim's channel.
But that covers every game company I've ever worked at
Hope Tim
and
doesn't
every
watch
game
this.
I've ever worked on. That's my background. That's what I'm speaking from. So, for example, when I did I think there's a lot of caution in the game industry. A lot of people were like, "No, Tim, you're wrong. The indie game industry is great and
That's not what he meant.
has no caution whatsoever." Okay, I've never worked in the indie game industry. I believe you. It's kind of not what I was saying. So I feel like I don't need to explicitly put a caveat at the beginning of every video I make going, in my experience, this is what's going on.
Well, yeah, no, I agree with him. You don't need to put the caveat, but at the same time, I think people will watch you, and this is like me talking to Ghost Tim who can't respond. So I don't want to. You're not wrong. You don't need to put a caveat, but I think that people in the industry will look at you and hear you differently. They will know, okay, this is Tim Cain. He's made RPG games. He's worked in these sides of studios. I know I can then, I can use my own experience to know how much experience or what experiences he has. But I think that when players watch your videos, Tim, or people who aren't like super big into the game industry or really new to it, might just hear you and think that you know everything, which you do. But it's like you have your own experiences with it. Your views when you talk about like mechanics or like encumbrance, as one, is based on of RPG games. Sorry, I think I had to glaze Tim up a bit there. And for me, it's like I've never worked in a sports game. I can't really tell you how to make sports games. I don't know anything about these. I don't play these games. I don't really know about them. I can give you the basic high level design of what might make a sports game fun, but that could still be completely off from the truth. Made a coin dozer, you know how to make gambles. Shut up. Blazing Tim is allowed, don't worry about it. Yeah, no, so I get it, but I also think that some videos that you make, Tim, and this was like a year ago too, so this is old. You sometimes do need to repeat information because you might have different watchers between videos. I might have one person watching this stream today, right now, that has never watched any of my other streams or videos. And so this is the first time they're hearing me. So I would repeat, yes, I've been in the industry for over 10 years. And you guys have heard it before, and it's not because I'm trying to sound like egotistical, it's just that sometimes I'm saying things so that people know where I'm coming from, even if they have never watched my stream before. And it is kind of annoying to repeat myself, but it is also an important way to get people into understanding where I'm coming from.
In this section that I've worked on. So, but
Yeah.
it's implicit in every video I have. This is my experience. This is what's happened to me. I understand when people go, if you go, hey, that may be right, but the indie segment is going strong. I love comments like that. What I don't like is when people go, nope, you're wrong. That's not happening. It reminds me of all the women who got shut down in the Me Too movement by saying, I never saw that. I never saw anything like that. Well, okay, you probably didn't, but that doesn't invalidate someone else's
Yeah,
experience.
I've never seen someone decapitated, but people do get decapitated. And you know what? I think I can live a pretty decent life not watching somebody get decapitated. Ideally. Fucking
Anyway,
right.
please look at the career video. Second one that I see a lot, and there's kind of an underlying assumption in a lot of comments. Game directors always get their way. Now, I've said that that's when you're doing a project, the game director is the benevolent dictator and makes final decisions and breaks ties. And
Yeah, but that doesn't mean like I think people take that the wrong way too when I say that I started my company to have total control and I like to be the one in charge. That doesn't mean that every single decision I make is a good one. It means that I defer to the good ideas. That I like to have the control because it allows me to make sure that the values of our company are being upheld. That doesn't mean that I am control lean. It just means that I want to make sure these things up here are sacred. And this thing down here, which is the game, is something that we work on as a team. But these are sacred. These do not change. And I cannot trust anyone else with these. And I certainly cannot trust anybody to have these for me. It means you have a God. Okay, yes. You're right, Katsukaru. As long as you're accountable in your decision, that's fair. That too. Yeah, and for me, I think if I just can explain it better with nuance, right? Where I say I like to be in control of my company. Yeah, you could. It's so vague that people could just assume one out of a million things with that. But when I say that we have values that I cannot trust anyone else not to break, I think that makes more sense, right?
stuff like that. But in no way does a game director always get their own way on a project.
Yes.
Forget the fact that you run out of time or money or whatever, which happens in every game I've ever made. But sometimes you have leads in all the areas, and sometimes you defer to them.
Exactly. Yeah.
I especially do that with my art leads because I'm not very good at art, I'm not very good at judging art, and I'm colorblind. So almost any game of mine, actually, I'd say every game of mine, if you like or hate how it looks, it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah, I'm the same way. I mean, that's what I've said about Colton Chronicles. Every time somebody says something bad about the art, I say, okay, it will not be my responsibility. So if you hate how I've done it, it's a good thing because I will not be working on it. I will not be touching it. I hire a competent artist. I tell them, you are in charge of all this. Do what you need to do. I will focus on the game and the design. Boot the bot from your Discord? Is there a bot? Where? What bot? Oh, you sent me one? Lena VTuber. How are you doing? I knew it. Alright, where is it? Where's Lena VTuber? Let us ban them. Here, we'll do it together. Here it is. Ban. Done. I'm doing my job as a Discord moderator. Oh, hold on. I forgot to send good morning kittens to all my moderators. All my female-only moderators. All right. What were you saying, Tim?
Actually, I'd say every game of mine, if you like or hate how it looks, it has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
I take responsibility. As a game director, I take responsibility for everything that goes into my game.
Yeah.
And I give credit to all the people who worked on it. But I just want you to know, game directors aren't always the final say. Sometimes
No, and a good director should defer. A good director puts people in charge, has leads to defer to. And I think that the game director is a dictator, but that doesn't mean that dictators just make decisions based on their own views. It just means that the buck stops with them. And it has to stop with somebody. Somebody needs to be the final say. And sometimes that person can make the wrong decision, but generally speaking, even if a director is that dictator, if they're a good director, they will defer to what they think is right on the time based on the people that they have in charge, and they will then take accountability for that decision. They'll say, if this is bad, I made the decision and we'll try to fix it. Now clip it out of context and show that Raptor just bans VTubers for no reason, right? Just like Twitch. See the meme that the Burj Khalifa cost 1.5 billion to build, while GTA 6 is 2 billion? How much of this cost is art? A lot. I mean, there's just a lot of content. You know, think of how many like little mini games and models there are in GTA. And now you have to also, you know, bug test all this stuff. It's gonna be expensive. It's gonna be expensive.
Just want you to know, game directors aren't always the final say.
Yep.
Sometimes I defer to my leads, but if I work at a company I don't own, I have to defer to the owners. If the owners tell me to do something, no, or no, if they tell me to do something unethical, I'll say no. But if they tell me like, hey, we got to have this in the game because we promised it, or all games at this company have feature X, I'll be like, okay, I'll work that in. And publishers definitely do that. Anybody who's basically paying you,
they're the daddy.
If you accept money from someone, they have the final say in what goes in.
Yeah, and there's, I think they're, yeah, but it's, they do have the final say, but I think that every publisher will try to defer a little bit to the developers. And you do get cases where if a game is bad and the game has a publisher, gamers blame the publisher and the developer walks away scot-free. And I've known no publisher-developer relationship like this where that is exactly the case. The developers are always at fault for something. And guess what? When a publisher buys a milestone plan, guess who develops that milestone plan? That's the developer. If they fucked up the production of the game, if they planned it wrong, if they didn't prototype it well enough, or they didn't make a good vertical slice, yes, you could say at the end of the day, the publisher shouldn't have bought that, should have seen through the BS. But it was the developer that sold them that in the first place. It's not like the developers are completely blameless when a game is bad. It's just hard to pinpoint who's at fault, especially when, this is all like internal company secret stuff and people would get in trouble if they mentioned it. I get it. But usually, 99 times out of 100, there are faults on both sides. What's up? Yeah, what's good? This stuff is good. Tim's good. We like Tim. We're just getting off of the like 7 hours of development, so we're just doing some Tim Cain reactions today. But it's nice seeing some new people here.
When they have the final say in what goes in.
Yeah.
If you don't like that, self-fund your games. But publishers have frequently said, hey, we want this, we want that. It's why we had, I didn't want Securom on Arcanum. Publisher demanded it. I didn't want multiplayer in Arcanum. Publisher wanted that. We had publishers when we were shipping around Outer Worlds that wanted all kinds of things, microtransactions, stuff like that. Sometimes we said no, and we told them big negative because of that. That's a deal breaker. But sometimes you're like, okay, I guess we'll make a game that has that feature.
This is exactly why when you write your contracts with publishers that you take as much time as you need to iron it out perfectly. Don't leave any loopholes that they can take advantage of. Even if you trust the publisher, don't leave loopholes. Stop Talking said same thing that Tim said already so many times. I will continue talking more now, just for you, Tonic, just so you understand.
Which brings me to another thing. Game directors don't like every feature and all the content in every game they make.
Yeah.
People like to assume that because it's in my game, I must have loved it. And I've talked about how sometimes there's stuff I didn't even know about. A game will ship without me seeing every line of dialogue, without me seeing every item. I try to track everything going in, but for big games, that's literally impossible. Plus, see the previous thing I just talked about I don't have the final word and everything. Sometimes something goes in and I'm overridden.
Yeah, and you sometimes might catch that at the QA stage, if you talk with your QA team and they mention a bug. But if they don't mention a bug, it can just slip in. I mean, I've talked about before too that sometimes rogue developers will do some crazy things. There's a story I've told a few times about somebody who was above me who pushed in a feature change that he did not ask me about. even though I'm the only person who could have told him if it was a good idea or not. He just did it on his own. And I learned about it when QA asked me, hey, is this how this feature is supposed to work? And I'm completely blindsided by that. It just happens.
But there are also sometimes features that aren't the way I want them to be for a lot of reasons.
Time, you had to make
Biggest reason
cuts.
is we ran out of time
Mm-hmm.
and the feature wasn't implemented fully, or we went back to a fallback feature because we literally didn't have the time.
Yeah, and it's like, do you think that I, as a game director, am happy about that? No, I wanted the feature in as it was designed. So, no, I'm not happy with it. I can't name any game that I've helped work on or any work that I've done personally that I'm perfectly happy about. I mean, even back in like Darkest Dungeon, I made stupid mistakes. On the train game, I made stupid mistakes. And I've learned from those, and I thought that I was in the right, and I thought players would like that choice, and they didn't. And you have to just own it, and you have to try to change it. Unfortunately, with the train game, we didn't have time to change it, so kind of in a broken, messy state at the moment.
To do the one I wanted.
Still decent, I think.
But another one that often happens is I miscommunicated what I wanted. I asked for something, I got something that technically is that thing, but that's not really what I wanted.
That's why I say eight only at best, in my opinion, like 80 to 90% of any documentation you write as a designer. That's the goal. 80 to 90% understanding and perfection. Then you have other people read it, you have other people make criticisms of it, you have other people say they don't understand a section, and then you fix that up. But you're never going to write a perfect document your first time, and that's not the point of it. Your point is to get it out there so that you can start talking about it and try to build that foundation of understanding. I mean, there was a good one where, in many there was one that was really funny where this has to do with data assets and data tables in Unreal. I outlined the event system. The programmers did a really good job of implementing it how I wanted, except that it was all running off of a data asset, and I didn't tell them that I wanted it on a data table. That was it. But that one small mistake, that one small assumption on the programming team, which wasn't their fault, just kind of ruined it all. It was like, oh no, I can't put this in my spreadsheet now. So then they had to fix it, put it into. And to be fair, we then learned, and they then made sure to ask me every time, data asset, data table. And that helped a lot because then I could say, that one's okay to put in data asset, that one data table, please data table.
Technically is that thing, but that's not really what I wanted. And that's on me, but that's happened a few times, and there's no time to go back and change
It's
it.
always in my opinion, any miscommunication, I instantly just accept responsibility. I'm the designer. The goal to communicate the game is my job. If my documentation wasn't good enough for somebody reading, that is my fault, and I have to fix that.
So we're going with this. Sometimes it's an ability thing. Sometimes I've asked for something that literally no one on the team has the ability to implement.
Yeah, that's very true.
Sometimes it's because it's something really complicated. Sometimes it's because it's something no one particularly knows how to do, and no one on the team could figure it out.
And that happens a lot more than I think gamers think, is that a lot of times you just the way something is implemented in the game is simply because we don't have the skills to do it. And we'd have to hire somebody, but by the time we hire somebody to handle this feature in the way that we initially intended it to be, it's gone. And you could argue that you should resolve that in the prototyping phase when you're making your first playable, and at latest at the end of your vertical slice, because that's where you iron out all of the unknowns. And by the time that you're past that, if you do that well enough when you're working on your alpha and beta, any unknowns that appear likely shouldn't be too severe that you can't resolve them. That's never the case, by the way, but that is the ideal scenario. And the more time you put into doing your first playable and your vertical slice properly, the less likely that is to happen.
So I don't get that feature. I got another feature I didn't want, because the one I wanted, no one on the team, including me, had the ability to do it. And then the final reason that game directors sometimes don't get what they want is knowledge of that the team has. There have been times where I've asked for a feature and I was told I couldn't have it because the engine didn't support it. And let me be clear on this. Every single game I made on an engine that I did not make, there's at least one feature in that game that either I don't like it or I didn't even get to put the feature in because someone on the team said that can't be done. And they were wrong. It could be done, but neither them nor me knew that the engine supported it or how it supported it. So let me repeat that. If I made a game and I didn't make the engine, there's a feature in there I don't like because it's not the one I wanted. Or there's a feature missing that I really wanted. Every single one of those. Modern game engines are complex. They have a lot of things they can do and a lot of ways of doing it. Sometimes you ask for things, someone tells you no, they're wrong, but you don't know that and they don't know that.
Yeah. Especially when you defer to people, it's just sometimes it's mistakes, sometimes it's laziness. It depends on the situation, right? It's like, oh, okay, you can't do that. Do you know that? Or are you just assuming that? So that's why you do have to do a little bit of, I think, research, a little bit of spiking, as you would say in Scrum terms, to determine if you can actually accomplish it that way. That's why usually the best scenario is like designers come up with high level for what the feature should do, and immediately talk it out with other leads. You talk a bit about how you want it, you explain it, you draw it on like a whiteboard or in some software. You act it out, and then those people will you defer to, because as a designer you are not the best coder, you are not the best artist, you're not the best at some of these other specializations, and you defer to them. And if they say that it can't be done, it can't be done. If they say that they'll look into it, great. If they don't have the time to look into it, then you just need to fall back to something else. If the specialist says you can't do that, you can't do that. Well, sometimes the specialist is wrong. Everybody can be wrong. Everybody's fallible.
So, boom, game directors don't like every feature that's shipped in their game.
Yep.
Another thing that tends to happen is I see a lot of comments where people say, you said passion guarantees a good game, or you said good communication guarantees a good game, or you said using this production method guarantees a good game. No, I did not. I never said anything guarantees a good game.
This is
You're
true.
assuming because I say like passion is super important, which I believe.
I think passion is it's a fantastic tool. It's the same thing I say, that your best chances at making a financially successful game are to have a good game. That doesn't mean that having a good game guarantees financial success, but that in almost every case of massive financial success, the reason is because the game itself was good. So if you focus on the underlying necessity to make a lot of money and to make players happy, that is to make a good game. And if you have that, yes, you can fuck it up. You can be a indie studio with an amazing game, but because you suck at marketing and you were too big-headed to talk to somebody about marketing or to find a publisher to help with marketing, your game doesn't sell and your game never gets seen. Sorry. But having a good game, being an indie studio and publishing your own game does not guarantee success. You've just had control over your lack of success. But guarantees a good game. Can you name financially successful bad games? Financially successful bad games. Starfield probably ended up making. Well, I mean, bad game is relative, right? It's individual. What you define as a bad game is different from person to person. Star Citizen. Well, Star Citizen is an anomaly. Like Banana. If people liked playing Banana, then it wasn't a bad game. I've seen so many vids of Tim where he's having to explain what he said in other videos because people don't get him. Yeah, it happened. Titan Rich. No. Ashes of Creation. Well, it's just like MMO. Well, okay, I will say that live service games with rolling development budgets are a little bit different in terms of funding and production than your average just buy it, pay for it, release it kind of game. Neither Assassin's Creed games after the third one. But I mean, again, I think Lazy Finks is right. Define bad game. And everybody's going to have a different definition of that. But no, I mean, I would never imagine that Tim would say passion makes a good game. Passion can help you develop a game, but it doesn't mean that you're a good developer. I mean, you can be the most passionate game designer in the world and just design a shitty game. It's not difficult. You can love game development and just never be good at it. I love bread. That doesn't mean that I can make bread. I love women. That doesn't mean I'll ever be. Okay, let's just move on from that.
Game. No, I did not. I never said anything guarantees a good game. You're assuming because I say like passion is super important, which I believe,
Yeah,
that guarantees a good game. Nothing guarantees a good game. All those things I just mentioned help. Good communication, being passionate about what you want and what you do.
it's a
Those are all good
multi-factored
things, but
industry.
none of them guarantee you make a good game. I've seen good games made by teams that I think were phoning it in. I've seen bad games made by people who were super passionate, and I was sad they missed the mark,
Yeah,
but they did. So these things happen. Games are complicated. Um, One huge assumption I see, a lot of people make this, is that sales, reviews, and budgets are all connected. So, in other words,
correlation is not causation.
if you
You know, yeah,
sell a lot, you probably have good reviews.
it's not true at all. You can have the best reviewed, poorest selling game in history. You can have the worst reviewed, highest selling game in history. You can have the biggest budget and have the biggest flop. You can have the tiniest budget and make the most. Balatro, how much money it's made versus how much it cost. Concord, budget versus failed in 2 weeks. Correlation is not causation. And there is some correlation between a game with good reviews or a lot of reviews that has sold well. But it isn't always the case. Con what? It's not the size of your budget, but how you use it. I mean, actually, yes. Actually, true.
If you sell a lot, you probably had a big budget. If you get good reviews, you had a lot of money. Not only are these things not connected, they're not even correlated. There are a lot of games that go out there that sell a lot and then don't review well.
I agree.
There's a lot of games that have big budgets and don't sell. So I think it's obvious if you think about it, but I still see people say things like, well, this game obviously is terrible, and so its sales must be awful. No.
No, it's definitely not the case. And I think that the best correlation you could draw between reviews or number of reviews or sales is actually just visibility in marketplaces. Having very positive on Steam or overwhelmingly positive puts you at a statistical advantage compared to a game that is mixed. Arguably speaking, your game selling a lot or having high reviews, or like a number of reviews, is not anywhere as important as what your reviews actually say. Monster Hunter Wild's a great game, many sales, but the budget was so big Capcom doesn't know yet if it's a success. Oh boy. I think it will end up being a success at some point. I mean, it's already sold millions of copies, right? But the budget can't be that high. That's selling I don't know, how many copies has Monster Hunter Wild sold? Monster Hunter Wild's sales. Monster Hunter breaks and yet another, but wasn't that just a playtime record? 8 million units. A lot of sales. How big was their budget of 8 million? If they're not even sure at that point. That's wild. It can't be that big. That would even put it, that would rival it with like Concord's budget at that point. Because the game is what, selling for like $60? $70? There's no way. Where's Monster Hunter? Wait, where is it? Wait, seriously, where is it? Am I missing it? Oh, it's third? Oh yeah, I didn't see it. Okay. What was I looking? Or I was looking at price. $70. If March 4th they sold 8 million units sold, and it says sales, not players, this would legitimate, and if they weren't sure at this time that it was financially successful, this would legitimately put it at a higher budget than Concord. There's no way.
Sometimes sales are awesome. Um, and guess what? Guess what the biggest thing sales correlate with? Marketing budget. If you have a big marketing budget, you can probably get a lot of sales.
I'll show you something. I'll show you something, guys. Red Dead Redemption 2 budget. 170 to 240 million. And also marketing budget 200 to 300 million. But the development budget was 170 to 240. Cyberpunk 2077, 436 to 441. It was more expensive to make Cyberpunk than Red Dead Redemption 2, and I'm gonna give a really big hot take. Red Dead 2 was a better game with a lot more depth and playtime. I know, shoot me for it, shoot me, but Red Dead 2, way better. It's not a hot take. I don't know. I was never a big Cyberpunk fan. I think the game was kind of shite. Good story. If it was a linear story-driven game, it would be pretty decent. Cyberpunk fixed yet? Some of it, yes. Some of it, no. I don't think marketing budget should be so huge. I was there. I went to Gamescom the year that Cyberpunk was coming out, or it was like the year before it, right? Whatever it was the Gamescom before Cyberpunk released, whichever one it was. And they were spending so much money on marketing that game. It's wild how much money was spent on marketing that game. And I don't know why they did. I think that the only reason they did that was because they knew that the game wasn't ready to release. And their only bet was to hype it up so much that they made money back on sales and could then just fix the game. There's no way that they knew that that game was not broken. There was no way they knew. Wait, let me phrase this in a way that isn't like a triple negative. They knew that that game was broken. You think they released the game when they did? I think that they chose when to release the game, yeah, but I think that they knew that that game was an absolute, yeah, it was a switch in concept of the game. It was incredibly broken on release, and it wasn't even close. Like, it was No Man's Sky level of broken on release. And the game was just not great. Doesn't even remember the the cars in Cyberpunk on release would go, like, they would follow like a spline and then just turn like this and move forward. Like, you knew the game was broken. You chose to release it in that state. So yeah, that's why I just don't trust. I don't trust CD Projekt Red at all, because they have proven that they will release a game in a horrible state just to make money off of it, and they will not stop. By the way, this was after delays, and they will not stop to halt marketing or to be honest with players. Simple as that. The initial game was supposed to be several character stories that impact the world. Well, they also said it early on too that the game was more RPG than shooter. That this was a game for RPG lovers first and shooters second. And then you play it and there's barely any RPG and it's pretty much all just shooter. And it's not even good shooter. It's pretty much just shooting. Yeah, it's like that's all it is. And it didn't have good itemization. It had it had pretty good customization. But it didn't have any itemization. The RPG elements were lacking and character progression was a joke. And even the shooting just wasn't well balanced. You could shoot through buildings with those guns that shot through walls. You could just sit behind buildings and shoot every single enemy from behind cover. How is that good? Who thought that was good design? Yeah, let's make a cover shooter where you can shoot through cover. So what's the point of cover? they were bolstering about not having investors and trashing on studios that had, and they end up having investors and doing the exact same thing rush release. And then they abandoned the Red Engine for Unreal Engine 5. Same reason I didn't love Hogwarts. It was just a good game. Yeah, but at least Hogwarts was a playable game that was good. That's it. Like, yeah, there were problems with Hogwarts, but it was at least worth my money. Cyberpunk was just not. And it was so bad that they had to remove it from the PlayStation Store for like 2 months. Made it a good game? I don't know. I still think the revamp just made it playable. But it's still a shell of the game with a bull in China shop mentality when it comes to its world. It's great to look at. You can make great screenshots of Cyberpunk. But the game has no reactivity. The world is dead. There's barely anything to see and do. Compare it to GTA 5, where you can actually just go around and interact with things. You have little mini games. You can play golf. You can play tennis in GTA 5. GTA 5 has infinitely more RPG reactivity, especially with its open world, than Cyberpunk did. All right, sorry, Tim. We're getting off track. I'm sorry, Tim.
That's
Forgive
just
me.
how things work. I don't like it. And there are exceptions. There are, especially in indie games, there are games that hardly got any budget, got thrown up on Steam or something, and suddenly were these breakout hits.
Yeah, tons
I
of them.
wouldn't rely on that if I were you.
Yeah,
That's
you cannot develop your game thinking you're going to make the next Stardew Valley, you're going to make the next Balatro. You won't. And if you do, you haven't proved me wrong. You're just showing that you have to hit the market at the right time, at the right place, with the right combination of things in order to succeed. It's not about luck. Fuck you, I will. I just like RDR2 because everything felt forced to take 10 hours. I like it. Once you adapt to RDR2, in my opinion, RDR2's play like style and the pace of it, I think it becomes the best ImSim that we've ever seen. At immersion levels that shouldn't exist. I hate it because it just shows me how much more I have to learn as a designer. That's why I hate RDR. You know, I jokingly hate RDR2 because it's like this is a better game than I will ever design, and I need to learn how they did it, and I need to try to recreate it. Maybe it's because I only like, yeah, don't play mouse and keyboard with RDR2. That's just suicide right there. That is a game that was built for controller. RDR2 could have so small budget due to already developed framework. That too, by the way, Rockstar is honestly just developing games very well. They really are. They're just bettering their technology over and over and over again, especially like their ragdolling and character technology. It's exceptional.
or something, and suddenly were these breakout hits. I wouldn't rely on that if I were
And
you.
vehicles.
If that's what you're planning to do with your
Physics.
indie game,
The game is so their game is
best of
so
luck
good.
to you. Probably won't happen.
Yeah.
Um,
True.
Also, one reason sales often correlate with really good games is, and marketing budgets, is when a game is being made towards the end and it gets evaluated and people go, oh wow, this is going to be really good. Often they get their budgets increased, their marketing budgets. So when a company realizes it has something really good on its hands, it goes, whoa, we better market this. One thing that I've noticed, and this is kind of related to sales, customers, and in this case, game fans,
That's us.
they don't do what they say they're do. The biggest example I've seen outside the game industry is the airline industry. People love to complain about airlines, about they don't get fed and their seats are terrible and they have to pay for
And
their
then you
luggage.
then you hop on the plane.
It's your fault. That's why the airlines are what we made them into.
Yes.
When the first airline cut their tickets just by $10 or $15 and stopped feeding us, most people went for the $15 smaller ticket. So all the airlines stopped feeding us.
Yeah, it's the uncomfortable truth about game development that I still cannot word properly, but I know that what I mean is correct, which is
When one of
that gamers are to blame for a lot of the industry practices that are hated. 5-day early access to your game is still being used because people still pay for it. The game optimization is still an issue because players still buy unoptimized games and just wait for it to be fixed. Yellow paint is still allowed because people grumble about it, but they still buy the games with yellow paint and then they just mod it out. If gamers could just rise up, and push back against the things that they don't like in a significant manner, they will change. Fair in the optimization one, in some cases you want. Well, that's also true, but that's just because you can't account for every, like configuration of a game, and sometimes like weird third-party software will cause the stupidest issues in games. But I agree with you. Easy difficulty in Elden Ring. I mean, it's because people buy Elden Ring, they don't care. The actual number of people who want an easy mode in Elden Ring are such a tiny minority of casual gamers that they don't matter. De novo spyware. Hey, if the game is good, if the game is good, people are going to buy it. That's what I still believe. I strongly believe if the game is good, people will buy it. They will put up with other shit like de novo. But I also, because of that, I think that if you make the game good, you don't need de novo because people will buy it regardless. Stuck in the middle of the ocean for 3 hours on Atlas launch, couldn't even refund it. That's why I don't think pirating is that big of a deal. Some games do require you to play more than like 3 to 5 hours before you can actually understand if you like the game or if the game runs well. Just pirate the game. Who cares? If you don't know if you'll like Colton Chronicles, just pirate the game. Who cares? You know what? I hope you like it. And I hope that you can afford it one day. If you can't afford it, pirate it. If you don't know if you'll like it, pirate it. If you don't think our demo is enough for you to know if you'll like the game, pirate it. I don't care. My new game has to require a 2-hour waiting screen before you can use the main menu. Classic.
So all the airlines stopped feeding.
Hey, shader compiling is a good thing. We like shader compiling.
Accepting baggage and made you pay to put it on.
That is actually a good thing.
Again,
gamers should want that.
People bought the cheaper ticket and said, "I'll just carry on." Then when all the carry-on things got crowded and they started doing staggered tickets and like, do you want basic or basic economy or super economy plus or whatever? Again, there are people who go for those lowest tickets.
Yeah, because you're sitting on the plane for what, 4 hours? It's like, well, I can suffer shit for 4 hours as long as I don't have to pay more money. How much is my time worth? 4 hours to save $100? Fine. I'll just sleep.
Airlines didn't make us do this. We did it, and they went where the money is.
Yep.
So in many ways, the airline, I always hold that up as an example of customers say they want these things, but when it comes to paying for them, they won't pay for them. So the airlines don't provide them. In gaming, what this corresponds to is people say they want originality, but that's not really what they want. Looking at
familiarity more than often.
Familiarity, which is why sequels do well. And they want high production.
Tim, stop stealing my words. Stop it. Stop it, Tim. Bad Tim. But yes, familiarity is what people want. Which is why, honestly, if you're making an indie game, you do need familiarity. I'm honest. I mention it all the time. If you make some indie art junk, okay, and yes, I'm gonna call it that, and you expect to be financially successful from your weird indie game that is taking some new idea of art. You took LSD or weed, or you sucked some dude's dick while you made it. Fine, whatever. But nobody's gonna buy the game because of that. Your game does need some familiarity in order to draw people into it. They need to know my game is going to play like this and this. Oh, I've played those games. I like those games. That helps me understand that I am part of the target market. And Dior, but he knows, exactly. My next game will be not Skyrim. Classic.
Why sequels do well. And they want high production values.
Mm-hmm, they
Not
do.
necessarily an original game. Sometimes a game will come out that's just a higher production value of a previous game.
I hate to say it, but actually that's one of the reasons I made Colton Chronicles the way it is. Sure, I could have made a 2D game with alchemy. And it's not that it would be unsellable. It's just that by aiming for a higher production value than what I could make with $100,000, by aiming for $3 to $4 million US, I know that I can achieve a production value that will turn heads. Sorry, but it's just more of the market is here. And I know that I can turn heads with a 3D game that looks a bit higher production value than your average 2D game. And I say that as somebody who loves playing 2D games. I've played this game before. LSD and weed are still settled on pixel pastel trash special butterfly. I mean, it happens. You know what turns head? Big. Okay, well, yes, big boobs also do turn heads. Thank you, Indior, for the follow. Nice to see you. Sorry you're catching us near the end of the stream, but it's nice to see you.
Why sequels do well, and they want high
And
production
bake.
values. Not necessarily an original game. Sometimes a game will come out that's at a higher production value of a previous game,
Yep.
and people flock to that high production one. So, and those games will talk about some feature they had that a game 10 or 20 years ago had. No one cares. And I know you guys are saying, I care. Well, guess what? Enough of you don't care. If you care, then look left and right. Those people don't.
You're in the minority.
So,
Well, that too, and you take a game like Ghost of Tsushima. I would argue that Ghost of Tsushima did nothing of major consequence that was original. But it did everything that it did to such a high level of quality that that game does feel unique. I mean, it just was a very well made game. It was produced really well. All the gameplay elements were great. The story was fantastic. I loved playing in Japanese. It was awesome. And on a PS4, it's a fantastic game. It is 9.5 out of 10 or 9 out of 10, whatever. For me, it's up there. But arguably, as a game, I don't really look to that game and say, yeah, we should do things like that game. It was a fantastic game. It did nothing super originally, and it didn't need to. And it sold well. It reviews well. I love it. Need to play it now that Sony got rid of mandatory PSN. Thank God. Stupid choices. Considering just slapping some asset packs together, but make sure it does well for my first release game. Hey, look, if you're not an artist and you're just like a solo developer, I will never judge you for just throwing some asset packs together. Especially if you're a solo developer. You know, it is what it is, right? It's your first game. Go for it. Do what you need to do to get it done.
this is what's driving the game industry. They've learned to make what people buy,
Yes.
not what people say they're buying.
Well, yeah, but you have to. I agree with Tim. I'm not disagreeing with Tim. But if you're making money, if you have investors, if you have publishers, they are your daddies, you suckle their teat, your goal is to make the money. And you do that by making something commercial. And a lot of indie developers, sadly, do not understand this commercial aspect. They might make a good game that caters to 10 people. I don't disagree with Tim. I just think that you have to do it. It's a company. You have to make money. You have to make a profit. And it's not that you have to get rid of creativity, sacrifice creativity for profit, or sacrifice profit for creativity. There is a balance here. There is a balance, and you have to try to achieve it. It's not easy to achieve, but you can achieve it. Or you become EA, or you become indie flops that, end up on itch.io because there's just not enough people to actually support the game's budget of $10,000.
And this is just something you learn the hard way when you're trying to be a game director and you're like, I want to do something like this, and people go, that's probably gonna be a niche game. I've made a lot of niche games,
Yeah,
and people wish I continued to make niche games, but at some point, you kind of want to make something mainstream.
You have to. Like Cutgoder says, a lot of people come into it for the passion, not the business. I agree. If you're making a game and your goal is not to be financially successful, you can make whatever you want. And even then, you can still make whatever you want because it's your art. But if you are trying to make money in the industry, there's only one way to make money in the game industry. You sell a game. And to sell a game, you need to make the game sellable. And that will mean appealing to a market. And you do that by putting in things that, as Tim says, as I agree, are familiar, are marketable, making the game higher fidelity, making mechanics that are familiar enough but still unique, at least in combination, or even unique. It's a new type of genre, but that doesn't guarantee success. It's just a mix of all these different aspects. In rare cases, you create your own market, but that is a 1 in a million. Yeah, it's like you're not going to be the next Notch. You're really not. Everybody wishes they could be, but you're not going to be the next Notch. This is why I'm looking at tools like Blockbench, like make simpler graphics that someone like me could actually make, and then it would at least have its own unique art style. Yeah, that helps. And then you just have to okay, can you make that, right? Look at a game like Unturned. this game had like marketed. This game had monetization in some way, right? I mean, through this 9.3 thousand reviews on the premium gold upgrade. Like this game doesn't require any crazy art to make. But it's not that the game was high fidelity, it's just that it came out at a time where zombie games were very popular and it did its game successfully. And arguably speaking, that these simple graphics also means that they could churn out content very fast. And you can't get that with high fidelity games. So, there's pros and cons to it. Sometimes a game like this just goes viral because, it was free to play, but also because it just hit the market at the right time. And you can't anticipate that.
Um, and that brings me to the last thing related to mainstream is bonuses and royalties. People assume that happens a lot. A lot of my games got no bonus or very little bonus. Um, Usually you'll get a bonus one time, and that's if the game does well. And if you're still there a few months later, if you quit or if there are layoffs, which often can happen, if you're not there anymore, no bonus for you.
Employee turnover is very high in the game industry, and especially if the game is not very good, employee turnover can be anywhere between 20 to 40% in some cases, or even higher. Which is also why I don't think it's worthwhile to try and put much stock into supporting a company, especially if they have like one bad game or if they're like a AAA company. CD Projekt Red, the people that made Witcher 3, by the way, which had really fucked up production, but the people that made Witcher 3, a lot of them weren't there for Cyberpunk. And a lot of people that fucked up with Cyberpunk probably aren't there anymore for Witcher 4. It just still less than in job cut close to my old apartment. It is what it is. But yeah, company turnover is high, and I don't think that a lot of companies can afford to hand out royalties. Like royalties are there to help pay for the next game. Bonuses can happen, and I think bonuses are very good, but you can't always promise royalties when you're trying to keep a studio alive. And if you were working on a shoestring budget for game one, if you're lucky enough to make enough money to fund game two, you're not just going to pay off a lot of that to your developers so that your company fails and then everybody's out of a job. That's not tenable. That's why I don't, work in like Golden Chronicles with people and talk about rev share. I cannot promise any revenue. I cannot promise that if we get revenue, we can afford to share it. I'd rather make money and give people a stable, well-paying job than give you some extra bonuses, but then the company doesn't have enough money to make the second game. It's just not going to happen. If I can afford to do that, if I can promise it, sure, but I'd rather just give bonuses when I'm sure that I have the money to give it. Sure, pretty sure you give your employees 100% of all money you made from the game. That's right. It's not my game, it's our game.
And then there's only one. If the game continues to sell well, RPGs sell well for years.
Yep.
No more bonuses. Nothing keeps happening. It's rare that you're in a situation where you get multiple bonuses like
that. You can still give bonuses. What I'm saying is that bonuses to me are a lot more stable because when I have the money, I know I can give the money. But I can't promise rev share because that's based on revenue that I can't promise will exist. And we might just make enough money to afford to make our second game. But if I've promised rev share, well, now we're going to be out of jobs because I can't afford the second game. So bonuses to me are much safer, and we could give multiple bonuses based on that. Those old sales of the game is what I kind of mean. What about profit share? That'd be on the net revenue. Again, the net revenue is tough because I don't know how much, we'd have to budget the second game first. If there's money left over after budgeting the second game and we are sure that we can make this money back to afford the second game, I'd still rather just give bonuses, which is, kind of like profit share. I don't know if that makes sense. I don't know if I worded that if I worded that right. Somebody's working for rev share. I feel like if you don't consider the company as part of the profit share, it could only lead to a single game for your company ever. That's kind of how I feel. It means he should take rev share and work for rev share for next game, so he's not costing. Yeah, but that's just it's a much more unstable way to run a business, and I can't. I don't think look, I can't tell anybody how to spend their money, but I think that it's just easier to know that you have a stable job and the company is not giving you money just for the sake of giving you money. that it can actually afford to give you money, that when it's giving you a bonus, it's because it has this surplus and it can afford to provide the surplus. I don't know. I don't know if there's a right or wrong way to do it. Just that for me, if I'm a company owner and I don't know if we can afford to make the second game, I cannot promise to give any like bonuses or rev share out. We need that money. That's how we stay alive as a company. Wait, you own a company since when? Sir? You're on the Microraptor game stream.
Sometimes the bonuses will be promised, but they won't happen. The company is doing badly, so they can't. There's no money to give you. Or
Don't promise something if you can't for sure do it. That's all. Don't promise things. I've worked for companies where they've promised me raises, and you know why they did it? They did it so that I wouldn't quit. Because they needed me to make money. But they didn't treat me like they needed me to make money. So I left. I thought this was Tim Talks with Reactors, exactly. I need that money. It's just, I don't know. You just be honest. Just say, look, I can't afford to give bonuses. I'm sorry, but we need that money to afford making our second game. And I'm hoping that that stable job is better than making a couple extra $1,000 that you're going to spend on a new TV right away anyway, and then wonder why you're out of a job 3 months later. Sorry. But job stability, at least for me, as both a developer and a company owner, is more important than giving people some extra money when we can't afford to give it.
or they go out of business. That's happened a number of times where it's like, thank you for working on this game, but 3 months later that company's gone.
Yep.
Also, sometimes they have to do layoffs because the burn rate to keep everybody on staff is so high that the money they're taking in just can't support having all those people on staff.
And that often happens at the end of a game cycle where either the next game you're working on is just smaller, and so you don't intend to have those 50 people but 30 people, or you didn't properly start pre-production of that second game at the end of the production of the first game, like you're in beta, right? Beta, when you're working on your beta, you should have team members moved over to working on pre-production of the second game, so that when first game finishes, you can move team over to working on vertical slice of second game, and there's very little downtime, right? I've been at companies where they've failed to do that, and they've ended their first game, and we're like, all right, what's the second game we're working on? Oh, we need to develop it first? No, I was hoping that you guys would have just an idea that we could just start working on right away. It's your company. It happens more often than you think. And then this company that I'm talking of was just like, oh, we need a viral idea and we need it now because we're wasting money. It's like, well, why did you start work on game 2 before game 1 was finished and then expect that game 3 was just going to magically appear out of the air? Maybe you should have done what I recommended 3 years ago and never started production on game 2 because game 1 was still in production and we hadn't finished it. You think that people that own game studios would know how to run game studios, but apparently not? I mean, it's just either like greed, incompetence. Look, everybody makes mistakes. If I get funded for Microraptor, it's not like I'm going to make the best decisions ever, but I'm going to try to make the best decisions ever by learning from these multiple failures that I've had. It's super hard for some reason. Yeah, it's just, I warned them. I'm like, why are we have never successfully made a game as a team or as a company. Why are you starting production of game 2 using funds from the company that we need to develop game 1? And you're pulling important people from game 1 to develop game 2. And now game 1 is fucked. Game 2 is a mess. And they were even at some point thinking about game 3. You can imagine my frustration. Which company is this? I will not name names, but it will not be difficult to find. Game 3 before game 1, yes, there was talk of that. Sean, I kid you not. I kid you not, there was talk of game 3 before game 1. And by the time game 1 came out and was just kind of a mess, game 2 had already wasted so much money. This was intended to be their game that was self-published, and they had to get the same publisher for game one that wasn't very good on game two. And they didn't even properly produce game one. So by the time that game three, which was going to be, properly made after game one instead of during the game one and game two's creation, I know this is confusing. Maybe drawing a graph would help, but they wanted to work in game three by the time that game one released, when they should have started game three 8 months prior by not starting game two in the first place and keeping the entire team together for game one. They just that narrows down that pin in a haystack. I haven't worked on that many games. I promise you. I promise you, you'll find it. There's the list of games, I think, below the stream that I've worked on. Red Hook has only made Darkest Dungeon 1 and Darkest Dungeon 2. Forever Skies was Far From Home's first and only game. That doesn't leave a whole lot up for debate. It's the greed that takes over and maybe pleasing their bosses for what they expect. I don't know. I think it's just incompetence. But yeah, it was... I like trains. I used to like trains. I still like trains. I still like trains. They will never pull that from me. So it's The Sims. I don't even remember what Tim was talking about. We got off on such a tangent. But yes, game 3 before game 1. The time frame looked like this. If I can draw it. Let me draw the time frame. Here's 1, 2, 3. Game 1, and here's the finish line, by the way. Game 1 was about here, where they then pulled about half or 1/3 of the team. It was about 1/3 of the team to do this. So now this game's original production, which already wasn't going well, keep in mind, they pulled members away from that who were very key and knew the game from this point forward to start this game, which was supposed to be self-funded with money that we got to pay for this game. For one. And then we were about... This one was in pre-production for so fucking long, by the way, that it was here while this game was maybe here, right? A little bit more progress. And they had started to think about hiring more people and pulling some people over, or using me to design 2 games, which, by the way, I don't think any game designer should do. I was the only designer on the game at this time, and they wanted to pull me to work on this game too. I gotta make trains in Minecraft at some point and love create. I see the devs spend too much money making the awesome 1920s Orient Express train DLC and forgot about the gameplay. See, I liked what I designed for the Orient Express too. I actually liked that. I spent a lot of time prototyping the mechanics for that. How did it get funded without the first one? The second one was funded with money that we got to develop the first one. We launched the ship before it's ready to start working on the next ship. I think it was because they didn't like how it was being produced, and they're like, oh, let's fix it, let's make our own game and let's do it correctly. That assumes that we know how to make a game correctly, and why didn't we do that in the first game then? Oh, so we don't want to learn anything from that. We just want to make the second game and assume that it's going to be produced correctly. But nobody wants to analyze why we think that the first game wasn't being produced correctly. That whole team was just... The people in charge loved to think that they knew what they were doing without analyzing whether or not what they were doing was actually good. And rather than admit that they didn't really know what they were doing, they formed a bubble of toxic positivity around the team where mentioning any criticism or bringing up the idea that things weren't going well would get you labeled as disloyal or a saboteur, rather than just trying to make games good. Were they the crypto bros by any chance? They did mention at one point that they wanted to make a... At one point there was... We should introduce NFTs. I promise you that got shut down quickly by me. And Then at another point in the future, they suggested making a game that was entirely made by AI. All the art, all the dialogue, all the story, everything. Makes sense? Yeah, yes. And then I started Cauldron Chronicles. I started Microraptor games with three values: transparency, collaboration, ethics.
So that happens. A bad thing that you hear about too is publishers sometimes just ignore the contracts. I've had that happen. I said they owed me this much, and they were like,
I've never had that
"We
happen.
don't think so."
Well, yes. Okay, so kind of. If they disagree with if there's any vagueness in the terms, they will use that to say, well, you didn't fulfill your obligation, so we don't have to pay you. Sensei Puncha, thank you for the follow.
And I know what you're saying. Well,
Bam
sue 'em.
boom.
Let me tell you what happens if you
How you
sue a
doing?
publisher. They'll defend themselves, and they have deeper pockets, and no other publisher will want to work with you. So
Chaos bot. Got him.
good luck with that. It's not just happened to me. I know, talking to colleagues, they've worked at other companies where a publisher screwed them over. Sometimes they audited them and got their money. Sometimes they didn't.
Yeah.
But it's rare that they then work with them again. So that's a problem. And because repeated big bonuses are a problem, even if you get one, don't plan on that happening every time, or don't even plan on that happening again. The game industry is very different than the movie industry, the music industry, the TV industry. Actors get residuals, screenwriters get residuals, musicians get royalty. Although that's changing. I heard Trent Reznor say he doesn't want to make music anymore because music is now a commodity. Well, guess what?
I would generally say that that's probably the reason, because this is just an assumption, and hopefully not an incorrect one, as the video states. But generally speaking, I think movies generate more profit than many games. Even bad movies, like just carbon copy Marvel movies. Sounds like something Trent Reznor would say. I don't know. I would think that actors probably get residuals. No, averagely. Yeah, I'd be curious to see what the numbers are. You're probably right, but I think most movies do. You're also doing with Hollywood finance. That's true. I mean, it's just a different industry. I don't know the movie industry at all. I'm not going to pretend to. But I know for games, it is. I think the game industry is larger. I think more games get released a year than films, and that's not even worldwide. That's just regionally. I don't think I'm wrong, but I'm probably not like fully right either.
Changing. I heard Trent Reznor say he doesn't want to make music anymore because music is now a commodity. Well, guess what? Gaming's always been a commodity. So it's very rare for you to make any kind of money after the game ships over your salary. Maybe you get a bonus once, maybe twice. Rare is a royalty or residual
It's very rare. Yeah.
situation. But I see a lot of
Never
people
had it.
assume that's what it's like. Most work in the game industry is work for hire. So WFH used to mean work for hire, not work from home. And most games are work for hire. You get paid a salary to do it, and then you're done.
Yep.
So I think I've rambled on long enough.
Tim, you don't even know the half of
Those
it.
are all the assumptions I see people making in the comments.
I think you're bad.
Just wanted to basically talk about them so people go, oh, I guess things don't work the way I think they work. And also, if you want to leave comments in the future, I may sometimes reference this video if I think you're assuming something like I've said here.
Do it.
Anyway, that was a long video. Thanks.
Tim, you like I said, you think you're bad. Tim, you should see my videos. Another great one though. Always a good one. And that kind of went on a lot of different tangents for both me and Tim, which is great. I do like my tangents. If you like the video, go give Tim a like and a sub. He definitely deserves it. He makes tons of videos like this. Please go give him a sub, because my content is a mere shadow compared to his awesome videos. And we only watch a small fraction of them. So if you're watching YouTube, thank you for watching that one, and I will end the YouTube recording there. Hope you enjoyed it. That was a very long one. Bye-bye, YouTube.